The journey begins in probably early 2018, possibly end of 2017, but it was very early on just a dream, just something that we were noticing that was happening in the USA and Canada. And then it sort of shifted towards, well, hang on, we're currently stuck in the rental market in Melbourne. So it started to turn to a kind of financial conversation, and probably throughout the last few years as well, we've been on like a journey of like learning about what's going on with our climate and the health of our world, and that was just becoming more and more important to us to do something about that, to make sure that our footprint on the world was reduced as much as possible.
Luke and Jess started dreaming about living in a tiny house in 2017. And in this interview, they've taken us through the process of dreaming about their tiny house, planning it, building it, all the ups and downs, everybody involved, everything that it took, and all the way through to how the tiny house has facilitated their next chapter in housing. So these episodes are celebration of what our clients have achieved in their tiny house builds, and we focus on what it took to get there, as well as the obvious success and beauty of what they create.
So these are our steps to the loft. So they just slide out and then you just walk up them.
I love that. That is such a good design.
But yeah, I really learnt on the job, which is, I think, probably the best way to learn anyways.
Putting the bathroom wall in, it's like, oh, it's not quite lining up. And I'm like, yeah, that was my fault from the beginning.
What you see, hear, smell about each other, that just amplifies.
It's going to be way better when we start building every day.
Yeah, we purchased that trailer with about a 6-month timeline, knowing that, we'd have to kind of get the trailer, start the build, finish the build, leave our jobs, move out of our apartment, downsize, and tow the house to Queensland. And that all happened.
That sounds so stressful to me.
I think that seems like it's probably a bit of a pattern for us, isn't it?
It is. It's like we find ourselves in a comfortable position and we just like look for some sort of risk or challenge.
I think challenges are definitely the more positive version of that.
Yeah, so Luke said Ross mentioned that he'd found you guys, or Fred's tiny houses, and that he had a visit with yourself and Fred coming up, and so we tagged along to that.
Yeah. That's the first time I think I've been to Castlemaine. It was
beautiful.
A nice time.
It was really exciting, and obviously we saw your home, and we had a really long conversation and coffee with you guys, and realized that like it was actually so much more possible than we realized. And that we kind of had the savings sitting there that we were thinking would be going towards our first mortgage, and we realized that would actually pay for our first home if we went tiny. So that's sort of where it the decision to move forward and make it happen kind of clicked in.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to just note at that point that as a couple, the only thing we bought together was a mattress for $1,000 mattress or something. So going from that to that commitment to building this house and going on that tiny house journey was a pretty big deal. So it was a big step, and don't regret it one bit. That's the sort of point we're at, I guess.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the financial side of things was like a big winner. Like the fact that we knew that we could essentially make our money back by not paying rent in the future. So I felt like that was really safe for us to do, and it's been a really good decision in the end, I think.
I knew I wanted to study my honours in psychology.
Right. Yeah, true.
And while I applied in Victoria I guess we had friends that were moving up to Queensland, and we had we knew that there was programs up here for me to do, and we knew that with like, you know, living permanently in a tiny house or caravan, that there were councils up here that were kind of that precedent had already been set, that there were tiny houses in this area, and they were able to live here with council approval. So all of these kind of factors, and then just the fact that we were like, well, you know, we're young, we haven't got all those commitments, we can up and leave and try something new, and try a new kind of way of living. So the decision sort of evolved to build the house in Victoria and then take it to Queensland, and live here in it, which there was just so many, I guess, levels of why that made sense for us. But another one would be that, you know, the weather permits you to be living outdoors a lot more than back home in Vic. So yeah, we knew that we'd be really comfortable in terms of the weather here and the lifestyle and
climate.
And
to add to that, Brisbane City Council, the rules around living in a caravan are quite good, as compared to a lot of councils around Australia. So if you're not a nuisance, if you're disposing of your waste correctly, you can live in a caravan in Brisbane City Council. We were there every second weekend, and those weekends were brutal. It was leave on a Friday night and wake up as early as possible on the Saturday, and work the Saturday and Sunday to start on things like the subfloor and those bits and pieces we could do. And then you get to Sunday and we drive home at 5, 6, even sometimes after dinner on a Sunday. We always slept really well on a Sunday night and then back into work on a Monday. So,
I'd almost say that was less exhausting than when we went full time though.
Yeah. We were like, this is gonna be way better when we start building every day.
There was so we were both still working in Melbourne and renting in Melbourne, and I was also studying at the same time towards that final few months of the year. So it was, I think it was, the reason we got through it was because it was 2 days of something really different. So we were energized and we were like leaving the city and leaving the mundaneness that we had had for quite a while. So that really sustained us. But then in December towards Christmas, we both left our jobs and then built full time for about 6 weeks, we think.
6 weeks?
December, January, maybe it was more like 8.
I think it was about 2 months. It was about 2 months. And that was 2 months of
7 days a week.
7 days a week, and sort of varying from 8 to 14 to 16-hour days. You know, like it got to points because the time pressure was so great. And admittedly, I think that's one thing that we regret, that we didn't take more time on it, because I think we really did push ourselves. Like we both had like trigger finger from painting. Like we'd wake up every morning and go, oh, I can't straighten my fingers, and then they go, and then you're okay. But like we pushed ourselves, and we luckily had a lot of people helping.
And you had quite a few people on your team. Like you started out with 2 capable people building on your team, plus 2 sets of parents at different times. And were there any other tiny house heroes?
Probably 80% of the building time was us, mostly alone, or with Ross, Luke's dad. He would have to be the hero.
Dad came home after working all day and then did put in an extra 5-6 hours sometimes with us.
Luke's cousin was an electrician. He came
That's
probably
a really big help.
3 days or so to just completely wire our house. Like that's something. Luke, you assisted.
I was the apprentice owner. It was a really strange dynamic.
I think a lot of people end up sitting in that apprentice owner position, and it's awkward, right?
When I say making decisions but not making decisions, he'll say, what do you want to do with this? And I'll go, I want to do this. And he goes, well, actually, I thought it was better this way. And you go, okay, that's fine.
So it was definitely community build, but also the majority of the man hours would have probably been us too.
Oh, yeah.
And then Ross was definitely our hero in his expertise and his time that he put in, and because he's building a house himself, tiny house now. So for him, it was obviously about helping our dream come true, but he could learn from our mistakes as well and see it like come together which has really, you know, been helpful for him in his build now.
Yeah, that's so lovely. Yeah, you've got so many things on your side in this story. Like, you know, you've had a place to stay where you can build, you know, you've got people around you and you've got each other, which is so lovely. You had a financial setup because you'd saved for a house. And then you also had a big motivator. So, you know, you had a time. So so it sounds like a really good combination of things, and basically just a lot of people who love you, which is
Absolutely. Yeah. And and we're just excited for us too. And wanted to see it happen and be a part of it. So yeah, we were very, very lucky.
Well, what about the transport? How did the transport go?
Yeah, we have a few transport stories.
It's always the fun bit, isn't it?
You have to be the expert on what is needed and how to explain it. And I can't just assume that everybody agrees on an assumed amount of knowledge that what a tiny house is, what it's going to take, and what the toe ball is, what sort of connections it is. It is just a conversation that just you have to take on as the consumer.
Needed a four-wheel drive truck. So we found a guy who worked for a charity Ocean Crusaders, who do river and like waterway cleanups.
We were like, that's just meant to be. That's so us.
Sounds about right. And he was so great. He came out with his big four-wheel drive truck that they drive on like Fraser Island, you know, sand truck, you know, very capable, huge thing. The tow ball was scarily high. And so when they rocked up, it was this guy and I balancing the tow ball on like a four-wheel drive jack and like getting it on, and the hill's wet and it's slippery, and it was just horrible. That was probably the most stress I've had in years and years that day. But
those things aren't to do with the house. It's obviously the environmental things that you need to consider.
It rained for 5 days before we wanted to move it, and we were on a hill. Like, that's not a good situation regardless, but this guy was really capable and got us out of that tight spot that not many other people could have.
Oh, it's so scary.
And it is
not to look sometimes.
And it was so hard to judge. And Dad and I got to practice when we got the frame. When we brought the frame back from Melbourne, we got to practice doing that, because we were looking every power line on the way to Melbourne to pick the trailer up. We looked at and went, oh, that's going to be a bit scary. So we had it mapped out in our brain when we came back to make sure maybe we just need to go to the other side of the road for that one, or whatever it is on the country roads. And we went,
just reflect if you can on just things that you've noticed that have been different, or how the space has impacted the way that you relate to one another.
Yeah, I was reflecting that you have a lot less privacy in your relationship.
Realistically, is one big room. We can't both be on the phone at the same time. It's quite difficult. So I think the sound thing and having like a separate space is a big one. Our personal space bubbles are probably a lot smaller now. Yeah, we escaped a little bit. Like, I had a shed office for some days. If you have a fight, it's like a pressure cooker. You've got to deal with it, because you have to you have to be in the same room again. Like,
what we probably learned is that, we kind of have it out, and then maybe there's 5 to 10 minutes of not talking in silence, and then it's just kind of like, okay, well, this is, what happened, and kind of just getting through it and the forgiveness, and then you just move on with your day.
Totally. I can completely relate to what you're talking about. Just that time that I would indulge myself in feeling shitty would just go really small. I'd just go, and one has to be so mature, I think, to recognize it's like, okay, this space doesn't facilitate storming out, huffy feelings, holding a grudge. It just does not support that kind of feeling. What it supports is a fluid, ongoing, immediate kind of conversation around what's really happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And then I think the only other thing was like Luke's grown up being a musician most of his life, and so I think that's what probably you've struggled with, hey, is not being able to play music inside the small space. And So he has to find those pockets of times where I'm at work or not here. And that's one of the other things, one of the points that we would tell someone is that you design your space for your hobbies and interests and the way that you live currently. Yeah. And we also made things flexible, like with the way that the kitchen and the living space works. Like it can change into a dining table or an L-shaped couch or even a guest bed.
Yeah, I think that's a really great set of advice. Also, just that you're using the word current, you know, you're not talking about aspirational, you're saying like, what do you do right now? Because realistically, it's not going to change a great deal over the next 2 to 3 years, you know.
I think we're painting a picture of us being like really unstable people. Yeah. I swear we're not.
No, I think what you're displaying is you're summarising the high stress events of the last 4 years or something, and they make for great stories. So thanks for sharing. It's really helpful, and it also displays a lot of trust that you have in your relationship, that you can weather the stress, and it doesn't mean that you attribute stress to your relationship and then say, oh well, we'll have to end, you know. It's like, no, it's a stressful situation.
Yeah, you're right. And that's something we're getting better and like better, I think, since doing the tiny house, that it is a we're in this together situation at all times.
So it's kind of assumed, and it's also like it's stressful, but it's the reason we're doing it is because our dream. It's like it was our dream to live in a tiny house, to move interstate. It's my dream to do my psychology studies. It's our dream to live near family and to own a little cottage. And
don't mind us out of it.
About that, you know, your next bit.
Yeah. So
in around October, we had just thought about what we wanted to do next, and we had this list of this property in our mind that we want to buy. You know, Jess likes little cottages, so we thought, you know, find somewhere with an older cottage that we might be able to fix up a bit on a bit of land. You know, put the tiny house at the back. And build a big garden, I guess, and so we sort of had that dream.
Kind of thought practically, like if we are to have children in the next 5 years, I feel I'm going to really want to be near my mum. And they're very settled back home in Gippsland, and we have my niece and nephew there, and we have nieces and nephews in Melbourne too.
So in October, we found a house that ticked all our boxes, was near family, and we bought it sight unseen. We got Jess's dad Danny to have a look through with like on just a Zoom call, and you know, we trust them. We haven't even seen it yet, so
guys, congratulations. It's not unlike you though. Like, I get it from your story that you just take a leap, you know. You see the future and you go, all right, what do we need? Let's assess it. We're gonna leap, you know. So you display an enormous level of faith, and I think that it's paid off because you're not doing it without thought. You're doing it with consideration and depth of feeling, and it's beautiful, and I'm really excited for you.
Yeah, and we attribute being able to like buy that house to living in this house for 2 years. So
totally,
if that's the only thing we got out of this, that financial gain, then it would be good enough.
Yeah,
and it's definitely not.
it's
like
really
we've learned so
more,
much living here, and it has changed our lives in a lot of ways. But it's really cool.
There's the option to move the house back and put it on the block that we bought, but that is 2.5 hours away from where we're going to need to be for the next 2 to 4 years.
So we made the decision that to sell the house and sell it up here in Queensland, so that we could sort of have a bit of a clean break and move on from it. And we figure if it's not going to get much use, you know, it may as well be used by someone else who's excited and wanting to live that life for a bit. So very happy to hand that over to someone in that.
And you know, they're just, it's kind of it's stressful, but it's really about like that's just us making our dreams happen, and they've been changing and evolving, and so we just kind of jump into just make it happen.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. I'm going to let you go. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate it, and I look forward to hearing your next chapter.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Great, take care.
I'm your host, Shannon Schultz, and this is Candid Tiny House. To hear the full interview, jump over to the podcast Candid Tiny House. In it, you'll hear much more detail about how Luke and Jess experienced their tiny house build. including their injuries, their setbacks, and their logistical challenges that they overcame. They go into detail about their experience transporting the tiny house too, and hiring transport companies, as well as the lifestyle that living in a tiny house has enabled them to achieve. It's an inspiring journey, so check that one out. You can follow Luke and Jess on their Instagram page and on Facebook, looking up Life of Less. Links to that is in the show notes. Music for the episode is by Scott Buckley. It's edited by Media Magnet, and I'm your host, Shannon Schultz from Fred's Tiny Houses. We recorded this episode on Jara country, and we pay our respects to the Jar Jar Wurrung people. Please share this episode with anybody you think might benefit from it, and we'll see you next time. Stay candid.